Hello, everyone. I'm John Coleman from Apocatastasis, an Institute for the Humanities, an alternative college and high school here on New Milford, Connecticut, USA. In this recording, we are going to consider opportunities given and opportunities wasted. While we are looking at two examples, one from the civil and the other from the religious sphere, the commentary on a deeper level is really personal to each of our lives. Before we get into this discussion, a few words about ApocatastasisInstitute. You know, we've completed nearly 9 years of work in the classroom and work with the community. We have at the college 4 communities whom we have always served and done an outstanding job every single one of the days of these last 9 years. The communities in descending order are the dead generations past, that is to say, the academic discipline itself. We must be the throat to scholars from the past. The second community are teachers. Apocatastasis exists to provide a haven for teachers to provide and to live out their vocation in their fullest possible manner. The third community whom we serve are students. And there is a hierarchy here. A lot of these alternative schools, they jibber jabber about serving the student first. You can't do that. That's as stupid as a family serving the children first. This is not seemly, and this is not orderly. Everything must be done properly and in order. So only third do students find themselves in our attention. Many's a school has made an ass of itself by trying to cater to students first. This is fundamentally consumeristic understanding of education. Finally, before I get too much off track, I must behave myself. Finally, the fourth community whom we serve is the general public. We do that in liturgy, we do that in other community activities, in public lectures, and so forth. And grand work it is. I have some great people to lean on in order to instantiate this work. After all, it is the work of the Republic. It is not my work. It is not the other professors' work. It is really the voice of the Republic speaking through all of us. In any case, towards this topic of time well used, in the screen share, I invite you to join us at the Holy Liturgy online during the school week. You may join the staff and students of the college as we sing the Divine Office. And if you go to our website, which you can find down below in the description, you will come to this page, and this subpage has all the information you need in order to do that. It has the schedule of the hours conveniently posted, as well as a whole bevy of supplementary resources you may benefit from, whether you're new to the Holy Liturgy or not. And you can also find, maybe most importantly, the perpetual link. You just have to click on that and you're popped right into the room. And again, there's no need to be enrolled in any of our classes or any of this sort of thing. Okay, so this is our main advertisement for this recording. Please do join us for the Divine Office. And this addresses, as this subsequent presentation will address, the fourth part of Apocatastasis, the enrichment of the general public. So, with that, we will set ourselves up for the forthcoming discussion. We're looking at opportunities given and opportunities lost. And I want to use 2 examples of wasted opportunities. Wasted, again, bring this down to the personal, bring this down to the people. Wasted because the partisans of these movements messed up. Not wasted because of giant plots, not wasted because of things out of people's hands. Wasted because the nominal adherents and advocates of these things dicked around. They wasted time, and now they are in the position they are in, and they deserve to be in that position. These two communities, and these are simply leitmotifs. I could have chosen others. These two have been, depending where you are in the world, in the press somewhat lately. One of which are the so-called traditional so-called Catholics and their liturgical situation with Rome. The other concerns the partisans of President Donald Trump. And in both instances, the Most High gave people opportunities, and these people wasted them. And that's what we're looking at. Why? Because you want to wallow in this? No. We want to be serious men on this earth, and we want to understand that if we affiliate with something, then, well, to whom much has been given, much has been demanded. The best place to go from here is not politics, and it's not corporate religion, but actually art. And so now we are going to listen to a song sung by Karen Casey some years ago, originally penned and sung in those days by Ewan MacColl and Peggy Seeger. This is called The Ballad of Accounting.
Evening solo sleeping, we wandered through our days as if they would never end. All of us imagined we had endless time to spend. We hardly saw the crossroads and small attention gave to the landmarks on the journey from the cradle to the grave, cradle to the grave, cradle to the grave. Did you learn to dream in the morning, not find the dreams in the afternoon? Without a hope in the evening, would you stand there in the traces and let them feed your life? Trail along behind them wearing blinkers on your eyes. Did you kiss the foot that kicked you? Did you thank them for their scorn? Did you ask for their forgiveness for the act of being born, act of being born, act of being born? Did you alter the face of the city, make any change in the world you found? Did you observe trespass notice? Did you keep up the grass? Shuffle off the pavements just to let your betters pass? Did you learn to keep your mouth shut where you've seen and never heard? Did you learn to be obedient and jump to at a word, jump to at a word, jump to at a word? Stand aside and let them choose while you took second best. Let them skin the cream off and then give to you the rest. Did you settle for the shoddy and did you think the right? Then let them rob you right and left and never make a fight, never make a fight, never make a fight. What did you learn in the morning? How much did you know in the afternoon? Were you content in the evening? Did they teach you how to question when you were at school? The factory helped you grow, were you the maker or the tool? The place where you were living enrich your life, and then did you mix some understanding of all your fellow men, all your fellow men, all your fellow men? Merci. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen Casey.
Well, Karen Casey gives us much to think about in that song, The Ballad of Accounting. As I'm recording this, I'm doing so on the approaches to Holy Lent, a period of preparation for Easter. And in the Western Church in days gone by, there was a period of time called Septuagesima, and this consisted of 3 weeks prior to Good Friday, or rather 2.5 weeks. And in the readings in the Holy Breviary for those days, there was the saga of Adam, Noah, and Abraham laid out one each week. And that would bring one right up into Lent, where you would have the whole Exodus drama read out all the way through, an inclusive Joshua crossing the Holy Land, all of that, of course, being overlaid on the New Testament mythology. By the way, if you go to the Divine Office website that I told you about at the beginning of this recording, you can see that I prepared actually a PDF file where you have the stories of those 3 patriarchs laid out. And so if you want to revive in your own life, as I have, the beautiful tradition of Septuagesima and leading up in the whole drama of salvation history, please feel free to download that article, that page, that PDF. The point of all of this, why do I bring it up? Opportunities given, grace is given, grace is wasted. Maybe the next time the grace is given, the person is wised up. So we have 2 miserable communities that we're going to be looking at, and they have caused their own failures, one of which are the so-called traditional so-called Catholics. The other are the MAGA movement, the partisans of President Donald Trump. I'd like to give some background to these peoples, and with that, I should, before so doing, have a disclaimer here, and that is I am profoundly sympathetic to the ideas, at least in general, of these communities. However, I do not belong to either community. I love the American Revolution and the American experiment far too much to have anything to do, or at least in the case of the civil structure, to have as little to do, given my family obligations, with the legal situation and the legal system. So I will declaim U.S. citizenship at every possible moment, although certain contractual obligations I've made, such as having their driver's license and such, obviously necessitate the representation of that fiction. When it comes to the legal fiction of the Roman Catholic faithful, which serves in exactly the situation that the U.S. citizen does, that is to say it's a fictional juristic person that's made up. In the case of the Catholic, at the baptism ceremony, and particularly with the baptism certificate that erects a franchise called a faithful, that actually I do not represent at all whatsoever. And again, that comes out of such a profound love of Catholicism that this had to be declaimed. I'm not going to elaborate on those anymore, except to say that I keep participation in the corporations that claim to represent America and the Catholic Church as far out of my life as possible. I'm much more interested, much like with Apocatastasis, in verbing things. I'm way more interested in actually being a self-evident reality, as opposed to just larding myself with all of this fictional garbage and all of these flattering titles. And, by the way, fundamentally, I, much like yourself, hopefully, please God, know who I am. And I am not a piece of regulable garbage. I'm not a legal municip, either in the United States Corporation or the Roman Catholic Corporation. And I'm not garbage and you're not garbage, and we should all just realize that we're not regulable garbage. You can tattoo it on your forehead if you want. Maybe I will someday. Anyway, that's a disclaimer. I should say going into this, though I call them miserable communities, though I point out that they have absolutely caused their tribulation. They are as culpable and as pitiable as Oscar Wilde in his jail cell. And until, like Oscar Wilde, the traditional Catholics and the MAGA people realize that they put themselves in the situation and they squandered opportunities given them, until they realize that, like an alcoholic or a drug addict, sex addict, in all these Alcoholics Anonymous, Sexaholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, until you hit rock bottom and you realize you created the situation, you will not improve your lot. So, what is it the Quran says? Until a people change their condition, God won't change their condition. That's a profound reality. There's a profound reality. Forget about your confessional affiliation. There's a deep truth to that. Until you change your situation, God's not going to change your situation. I'm reading a bit of Baruch Spinoza right now. So until your self-evident reality, nature changes, until you change that reality in this moment, nothing will change for you. Spinoza has a very interesting consideration of God, as does Leibniz, incidentally. Good place to start, maybe not a good place to end, but that's another discussion. Okay, so that's my disclaimer there. I don't actually formally belong to either of these communities, except in the case of the civil structure through their driver's license garbage, because of obligations I have. And then the Roman Catholic faithful, I absolutely disclaim. And when certain aspects of my life change, I will be completely relinquishing the legal person completely. It's pretty much gone out to seed, but I unfortunately have that one anchor. Anyhow, that's that. So there's that, and then also I am actually fundamentally very sympathetic to these communities and to where they're coming from, but they're such screw-ups that I just cannot, as a matter of self-respect, affiliate with them. Okay, but maybe they'll benefit from this presentation here. Okay, so again, we're looking as we change to the screen share. There's the Divine Office, always one to get an advertisement in. We'll get back to that later. Okay, so let's lay out some points about our communities here. I should probably refresh all of these tabs. So we're looking at two communities, and I'd like to give some background. And we'll see what pops up first, and we'll run with that. We'll move as the Spirit dictates. Okay, well, the Spirit's dictating. Hey, Steve Bannon. We'll get to him. Actually, this is a good place to start. So let's deal with the MAGA movement. This was a very interesting period in American history. I should hope it rides again. I don't think people realize how unusual that was and is. What you had, very much because of the insights of Mr. Bannon, who is the gentleman on the right here. And by the way, last disclaimer, last part before we really pull out of the station here. If you're not American and this is completely irrelevant to you, if you have some other political affiliation, when we get to the Catholic stuff, if you have some other religion that you're bellied up to, the principles that I'm laying out here are just as true for you. So again, try to think outside of just being a consumer in a tribe, right? These are meta principles that I'm laying out here. I happen to keep my eyes, amongst other groups, on these two parties, the MAGA people and the traditional Catholics, and a bunch of others. The point is, whether or not you are subjectively sympathetic to them is irrelevant. I hope you take the meta principles away of communities that their own failures destroyed them. Anyway, let's begin at the beginning. Mr. Bannon's genius and the unique aspect, in the true sense of the word, of Trump's ingress into power and his administration. The 2016 election, what made that remarkable is that Bannon was able to marshal factions of America that had long, for nearly 50 years, been written out. To put a nutshell around that, basically white working men. They actually exist. They actually exist in great numbers. And the MAGA movement was able to, kind of tap those fellas and other factions on the shoulder. There were many others besides. In fact, I would love to see a knowledgeable left-wing person. I don't have any time of day for liberals, but a leftist, man, a genius leftist with their books and their insights. Right? Don't waste your time with liberals and conservatives. If you want politics, you go to the left wing or the right wing. They're not the same. Liberal and conservative, those are the losers. They're in the sand pit. Right, your left-wing people and your right-wing people, they have some backbone and some moxie to them. But I would love to hear a left-wing person analyze the left-wing influence in the MAGA thing. A lot of people, a lot of you Johnny-come-latelys got into the conspiracy stuff, for example, or the truth community, during the COVID stuff, and you don't really understand things before then. What's interesting is a lot of the conspiratorial aspects, what we associate with the MAGA end of things, shall we say, those were left-wing 20 years ago, right? All those talking points about the New World Order and the globalists, that was all left-wing stuff. When you think about the G8 protest, was that in Portland or something? Way back when. And all of that stuff in the 90s and whatever. And it's really interesting to see that that mutation or that migration. I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but it is interesting that a lot of the slogans and a lot of the thinking patterns came out of a completely other aspect. I really would like a leftist or a scholar with more than 5 minutes a day to get into the books. Sometimes it feels that way myself. To analyze that, because the MAGA thing was not a right-wing thing, and it wasn't indeed a conservative thing. It was a broad coalition, largely forged by the capable hands of Stephen Bannon, and a remarkable opportunity for what? For democracy. The reason the cathedral, that is to say academia, Hollywood, and the civil bureaucracy hated Donald Trump personally, and hated, more importantly, what he represented, is because what the MAGA movement represents, and may indeed right again, is actual democracy. And it's interesting, if you read the globalist journals, as I have and do, the type of people they dismiss as populists, and often right-wing populists, which is, again, peculiar in all sorts of reasons, to apply to Donald Trump or to apply to others. But I mean, think about some of the fellows that we have now. There's the black fellow down in Kenya, who had a very similar electoral thing happen to him. There's Imran Khan in Pakistan, who had a very similar thing happen to him. There's Jair Bolsonaro, Jair, the Brazilian guy, Bolsonaro. Yes, Jair Bolsonaro, who also had a very similar electoral thing happen to him. It's almost like there's like a precedent that's been set, and populist people, actually democratically supported people, are constantly being torpedoed out of positions of power in nominally democratic bureaucracies. Isn't that really weird, huh? In any case, why did the American Cathedral, and why has the swamps in Brazil, Pakistan, Kenya, why have they responded in the way that they have? Well, because they don't like democracy. It is like Milton said, when priest turns atheist, right? What happens if you're a minister in a church and you don't believe in God anymore? Well, you're in a hard situation. Your whole life stability is predicated on the biggest sense of belief in God, and then having that be your profession. What happens when you're in charge of a democratic system nominally and you don't believe a word of it? Well, that's what we have right now. Here's your Enlightenment 300 years on. Turns out it was never about democracy. And when the people, the blood, not the bloodline, but the actual flesh and blood people, not the bloodline capital P people, when the actual salt of the earth put someone in, well, those people are shown the door as quick can be. Anyway, this is what happened with the MAGA movement. It was like a football game. The Trump quarterback was able to get around and get through the opposition, and since then the opposition has made every possible provision that will never ever happen again. At least they've planned for that. God has plans beyond that, but that's another discussion. I wanted to set this up. Okay, now we have to get into this situation here. And again, we're going to bring things all the way around and talk about how these communities did themselves in after having initial successes. So the other group would be a sect of the Western Church who call themselves traditional Catholics. We're going to sidestep a lot of the claims to both of those flattering nouns and adjectives, but nevertheless, this is a group who was poorly treated since the mid-20th century, and as the Arabs say, "Mithram ra'atin ala datrela," the wrath of a bastard is to be feared, or more colloquially, beware the wrath of a bastard. The traditional Catholics, because they were so poorly treated, developed rather sectarian approaches to things. And as the book of Proverbs says, oppression makes a wise man go mad. So a great deal of leeway should be given to the eccentricities of, well, in fact, the MAGA people, because again, much of their contingent had been written off by the cathedral as not existing in life any longer. And likewise, the people attached to the old liturgy, perhaps older theological methods, the old manualist tradition, for instance, those people had been also roughly treated by, I suppose, a certain analog to the cathedral, which runs the Catholic Church and the Vatican. In any case, these people had very much been on the outs, and there's a long history of that in Campos, Brazil, with the Society of St. Pius X, St. Pius V, St. Peter's group, and a bunch of others. We don't need to get bogged down into the minutiae. But nevertheless, in 2007, after having been out in the cold for nearly 50 years, they and their rituals were embraced once again by Rome. Here we go. And Cardinal Ratzinger, who at that time was Benedict XVI, the Pope. Here he is, all gussied up with his pallium and his mitre and all this jazz, his holy robes. And in indeed 2007, after a long period of privation, we might even say a wandering in the desert of sorts, the traditional Catholics were given an inn, just like in 2016, a large confederation of interests, maybe we can say somewhat conservative interests, and others had been given an inn by grace, by providence. They've been given, how do you say, the imperium in the society. Well, likewise, in 2007, the traditional Catholics had been given a place of tolerance and more than tolerance. They had been given a place of encouragement. And again, not to get into the nitty-gritty of Suorum Pontificum, which was the legal document which was quite conciliatory towards them, and more than conciliatory, but actually advocated, again, actually rather democratic reimplementation of the old liturgy. There is an aspect of Roman Catholicism which is very, very democratic. In fact, that might come as a shock to people unfamiliar with the group, but and particularly pop culture presentations, where very often it's presented as this adamantine church that is full of deaf people, and you know, pound on the pulpit and my way or the highway. But actually, it's remarkably democratic, and always has been. Actually, it's the first institution in Western society, maybe even in human history, that was merit-based. I suppose the Confucian bureaucracy, maybe, but the Confucian bureaucracy was something that was necessarily limited to people with absurd amounts of training, whereas the Catholic priesthood and religious life was open to anybody. So you could be, you know, some peasant girl from somewhere, and you could rise to be an abbot, which is like a, you know, CEO or something nowadays. Anyway, that's kind of a marginal note there, but there is actually a very genuinely populist aspect to Catholicism, and that was given a boost in 2007 by Suram Pontificum, which allowed your local parish priests to begin saying the Latin Mass, which had largely been written out of church life since the council. And I would actually say long before then in the hearts of many people, including faithful, including not a few faithful. But that's another discussion itself. The point is, like in 2016, in 2007 with the Catholic stuff, you had a tremendous opportunity of grace. Grace asserted itself in human history. What was the result of this? Well, we'll start with the civil, we'll start with the profane, and then get to the numinous. How, after being written out and having an in, there's one Protestant minister in Florida that says Donald Trump was like a door jam. There was a door jam. There was a movement of tyranny long building in this country, probably since Woodrow Wilson, maybe since Abraham Lincoln. We can chop it up different ways. Certainly building in the West since the late 19th century of great tyranny. You can call it legalism, call it technocracy, whatever. Donald Trump, and I certainly adhere to this, was a door jam. I think that's a great simile. It stopped maybe long enough for the people to get their act together. It stopped the agenda. And I have no doubt that the cathedral, if it had its way, was gunning to have Hillary in. And I don't just mean by advocating that woman sentimentally, but the same sort of shenanigans that happened in 2020 and 2022 with the American ELECT-ION. That scheme had been tried in 2016, and it stopped by way of grace in the middle of the night. The same SPIKES that you saw and so forth, they were sconched. That was the Holy Spirit right there. Anyway, why? To buy the populace enough time to get their own act together and to get their social arrangements together, to push back on the agenda, to push that door open for liberty, for freedom, but for grace and for God, most importantly. That was what 2016 represented. And how did the partisans of Mr. Trump, and in this I do not, just like when I'm talking about the Catholic stuff, I am not talking about the leadership, okay? If you ever listen to me when I critique people, I critique people. I'm not critiquing parties or the big shots or things out of your hands or my hands. You have a problem, you look in the mirror. And so when I'm talking about the failure of the MAGA movement, I mean the little Tom, Dicks, and Harrys on the street. We can have a whole other discussion about what Mr. Trump coulda, woulda, shoulda done in office, right? That's where people waste all their time. I'm concerned when I look in the mirror. What am I doing? How am I shaping up or not? and so forth. So when I'm critiquing these groups, I'm critiquing you if you belong to them, but also if you affiliate with all sorts of other things. The same principle I'm trying to bring to you. You got a problem, look in the mirror. So what did the MAGA partisans, how did they spend 4 years? They did nothing but squat on their perceived foes. Now, this is ironic because they made out other foes to be what they called the left, which certainly was not the case. Again, let's go down the list here. I have my notes, okay? Okay, they wasted 4 years. The MAGA people wasted 4 years on memes. Now, that's fine. The memes themselves are fine if you're into that. But what I'm saying is that they just spent it in mockery of the people they thought they had forever deposed. Little did they know that the people they had deposed had spent every minute since 2016 making sure that 2016 would never, ever happen again. And that was 2 elections ago, and it looks like they're on a roll. In this country and in others, there will be no more populist ascensions, let's say. There will be no more. Okay, if 2020 wasn't enough in these United States, you could check out again, Kenya, Pakistan, and indeed Brazil. Okay, so the MAGA people dicked around for 4 years, and they just had fun with memes and talking about the libtards and all of this. They were triumphalistic in that. Hi everyone, John Coleman quickly here in the middle of this presentation to invite you to go over to ApocatastasisInstitute.wordpress.com. And while there in the dropdown of about the school, you can find out all about just that, the classes we offer, information about enrollment and matriculation, our schools of theology, arts, and sciences, as well as our campus and staff and testimonials, in addition to related materials. We accept students of about 16 years of age and up and teach at the undergraduate level. And with that, back to the show. Then after a while, again, sidestepping the administrative decisions of Donald Trump, but then after a while, the MAGA people and those inclined to support that, they kind of splintered. You had the biggest group was just pissing on the libtards, as they would call them. And then you had one group that went in for, with the assistance of the NSA, CIA. Remember that Obama administration thing that allowed the CIA to work, domestically? Well, we'll save that little discussion for another day. But with, a little help from my friends, as the old song says, you'd one faction of the Trump coalition go in for the QAnon and for a great deal of wild philosophizing. Now, this is made, again, even worse because of certain internal decisions that people broadly called conservatives have made, including effectively swearing off reading, swearing off mainstream books if they read at all. And this is one of the less appealing aspects of American populism and American conservatism, is the suspicious attitude it has always taken towards the intellectual elite of the society. This is, again, also one of the ugliest aspects of the Reformation, and does tremendous damage to the actual ideas and benefits that conservatives, Protestant sectarians, and so forth, the good things that they bring to the table are often muted and made a fool of because of the anti-intellectualism in these circles. So the QAnon people, long story short, had very little immunity to the type of sensationalism that QAnon offer. This is actually a particular fault, a predominant fault of the whole truth movement itself. It's so paranoid and suspicious about the mainstream that it's shooting itself in the foot. And I see that day to day. interacting with people. They are making basic mistakes of who, what, when, where, how, and why, because they're not reading books anymore. Anyway. Then finally, in the splintering of the MAGA thing, you had the know-it-alls, right? They were the know-it-alls. They were maybe kissing cousins of the QAnon sorts, but they were, they had different interpretations that Trump was controlled opposition and so forth. Again, this is not really the place to get into the specifics of those sects. But the point is, you had the splintering. You wasted 4 years in pissing on the opposition. You wasted 4 years in triumphalism. They wasted 4 years in splintering up into various useless denominations. No discernment, no attempts to build bridges, just completely just King Konging it, right? I mean, you really thought the grace of 2016 was just going to indefinitely continue. It was the end of history, right? It was the end of history. So there was no discernment there. There was no bridge building. Okay. And then there was, to the point of this sort of recording, there was also the personal failure. As I've laid this out, the MAGA moment, what that represented was a genuine democratic shove back against the tyrannical agenda. You can call that all sorts of things. You know what it is. And the agenda knew that, and that's why they sharpened their knives in the way that I've intimated. What did we use those 4 years for? Okay. Did secularism stop in society? As far as I know, church attendance, partially because of the mismanagement of the churches, but in a bigger way, when personal decisions must play a role there. Listen, the nones, N-O-N-E-S, the nones, those who do not identify with any faith, those increased, and I don't particularly get into the religious stuff. I get into a lot of stuff that touches on religion, but in terms of bad movements and bad ideologies, I don't say this about all sorts of other groups. I will have no qualms saying that secularism needs to be shoved back as much and as often as possible. That's why I've been, in different contexts, quite supportive of Islam in the Middle East, Protestantism in Protestant societies, Catholicism in Catholic societies, and so forth. Because the real enemy at this point, or the real question, I should say, is not that of the true faith, but rather of faith at all. And secularism seemed to move completely apace during the Trump years. People did not take advantage of the opportunity. If I had to listen to one more person calling up on talk radio in those days, talking about Donald Trump being Joshua, I mean, I would hear this, like Rush Limbaugh, Rahimahullah, his anniversary was lately to this recording, or Michael Savage may have many days. People would call up these gentlemen and they would say, well, you were the Moses, you took us to the promised land. And then, Trump's going to lead us into the promised land. I mean, if the damn Cyrus coins, some of you know what I'm talking about. There's Cyrus coins with Trump's image and Nebuchadnezzar's image, right? Okay, fine. Fine, you're going to use all this religious imagery. I should do a whole show on like the religious pictures of like Jesus with his arm around Trump and whatever. You can use all this stuff. Well, where was the revival? Where was the religious revival in this country? Secularism just kept grinding along. Okay, and then on the personal level, right? And these are quantifiable. These are quantified. This is not speculation. The use of pornography increased. In fact, it increased in the areas of America where the support for Donald Trump was greatest. That is to say, the American South and the heartland. Okay, the use of pornography and its incumbent activity. Okay, that continues. Drink. And I say this as a daily drinker or somewhat daily drinker, and maybe I need to knock it off. Maybe Lent's a good time for that. Speaking of using time well. But again, intoxication. And when I say drink, I mean all sorts of intoxication. That didn't stop. I mean, all the capitalists in Connecticut are breaking wine bottles appropriately. Now they can celebrate more intoxication with their so-called marijuana. Again, you know my thoughts on the legal thing. But the point is, people are intoxicating themselves more. I'm not advocating having more attorneys to regulate things. Okay, fine. Let's be libertarian, whatever. But the reality is you don't want to be intoxicated on so-called marijuana, the drink, whatever. Well, none of that stopped. None of that stopped. You're intoxicated on porno, on the drink. Okay? You're drunk, but not with wine. What else are you drunk on during the Trump years? Legal persons, right? As far as I know, there was no mass movement. There was no mass movement to reject the Bar Association. So the thing which is causing the great tyranny in America, the thing which is causing whatever you consider tyranny, is it your abortion stuff? Is it your income tax? Is it the CPS? Right? No, it's all of those things because they all have the same root, which is the Bar Association. Right? There was no pushback against legal persons. Everything just hummed along. Everyone has their birth certificate. Right? How many of you had babies in the last couple of years? You trotted right down and filled that sucker out, and you asked for it because you had to apply for it. Right? You had 4 years to get your act together. You had this doorstop. You had this swelling of populism. You had the hakam in society. You had the power, and that's how you squandered it. Right. And then finally, analogous discussion, bank accounts, right? The digitalization, the bank accounts, the usury. That continued apace. And all these dummy conservatives, all they talk about, they cannot go 5 minutes without talking about homosexuality. These people, I don't know what the hell it is. You cannot have a discussion with these so-called conservatives, these Christians. They cannot go 1 minute without talking about some aspect of a queer sexuality. Fine, okay. Why don't you ever talk about the kissing cousin of sodomy? Why don't you ever talk about usury? Because you have credit cards in your pocket. That's why. You have mortgages. You have a bank account. That's why you don't talk about it. It's easy to beat up on so-and-so with glitter in the club. Right? It's easy because you're not doing it. Right? But the kissing cousin, actually, I would say the Siamese twin of sodomy is usury. But you, MAGA people, don't want to talk about it. And that carried on apace, just like everything else did. That's what your MAGA thing got you. It got you a big head, got you a big ego, got you 4 years of kind of funny memes, a lot of clicks on YouTube. And now, don't worry, Brandon and the neocons behind him and the neocons that shooed him in, they have worked like Hades, not just to make sure that another MAGA moment can't happen, but to make sure that you will be declared a domestic terrorist. And that brings me to my final point. The final point of this before we get to the traditional Catholic losers, and that is no implementation. We all know what happened in 2020. DOMINION. We all know what happened, okay? How many years, look at the truth community, how many years were people gibbering and jabbering about common law courts? Common law courts of the people. We're not going to do anything at Admiralty. There has been now 3 years since that travesty happened, and they put that guy from Delaware in. Where has been the common law court? How about Hunter Biden? Right? I thought you could just declare a common law court outside of the bar's jurisdiction. This is your chance. This is the chance of the research community. Where was it? Well, they certainly didn't make any groundwork during the Trump years, and they've sat around for 3 years. I guess Anna von Reitz, who is like Prester John, I don't even know if she exists. She's off in the hills somewhere organizing common law jurisdictions. This is a joke. This is a joke. Okay? You and I, and again, for the third and final time, if you don't care about the Trump stuff or the Latin mass stuff, try to see the same principles of self-defeat in whatever you affiliate with, and you'll find it. You want to be democratic, you want to be people-powered, you got to start with yourself. So let's get to these creeps here. The Latin mass people. Why are they creeps? Because they're poseurs. Why are the MAGA people creeps? Because they're poseurs. Why am I a creep? Because I'm a poseur. Why are you a creep? Because you're a poseur. How do you not be a loser, a joke, a poseur? Start living out what you're saying. We have all of these factions everywhere, not just political, not just religious. There are all of these groups out there, and they're all dicking around. They're not taking themselves seriously. That's fundamentally where I'm going with this. So you had this tremendous grace, right? After 50 years of rough treatment, unjust treatment on the part of the Vatican and the part of the bishops. And a lot of the bishops were criminals, and a lot of them were light in their loafers, and a lot of them were embezzling money, and so forth. And you can start with Cardinal McCarrick and have fun from there. After 50 years of rough treatment, the Almighty gave the traditional Catholic sectarians a position of hukum, a position of favor in the society. And what did they do? Well, their list isn't quite as long as the MAGA people, largely because there's a certain crossover, especially when it comes to porno, drink, legal persons, and bank accounts. But that will stand as it is. Let's just speak about the distinctive failures of the Latin mass people. Okay, and now I know there is a topic I would actually like to do a bit more research on, but I've clearly discerned something of a difference between European and South American so-called traditional Catholics and the American version. And I'm most familiar for 15 completely wasted years of my life with the American Latin mass poseurs. And so I can only speak mostly to that. But the ethos for those 4 years was the traditional ethos of the traditional Catholics, which is to be evangelical Protestant, right? I mean, more and more as the years have gone by, the traditional Catholics are sounding like Brother Billy's Bible Bastion Church. That's actually a copyrighted term that I'm going to, when I become a Methodist minister, I'm going to copyright that term. I was thinking about that yesterday. But Brother Billy's Bible Bastion is what I'm going to name my church. But the point is it's fun in here. It's fun in here. You never know what'll come out. But the reality is the traditional Catholics, at least in these United States, over the Trump years, just sounded more and more and more evangelical Protestant and thinking it. And you don't have to talk to those people for very long before that comes out. And where's your proof for that? Well, just look how they speak about church authority, right? And look at how they speak about their local bishop, how they speak about the Pope. I mean, listen to someone, like a Timothy Gordon or a Taylor Marshall, and you'll get what I'm saying. Okay. Again, the pissiness. There was various continuing factionalization, especially within the SSPX during those years. Again, as I'm recording this, Rome is about to effectively squelch the Latin Mass. So the period of time from 2007 until this recording in the spring, let's say, of 2023, that period of what? 14 years? 13 years? I'm not a math guy. Okay. I'm definitely not doing it right here, so I'm definitely not doing my my stuff here. So my mathematics. So 16 years? Okay, I guess. I don't know. So that period of 16 years is about to be over. Why? Because if you're the local bishop and you're the Pope, you're seeing nominal Catholics in some ways verbing very nicely, and there's a lot to be said about the traditional Catholic sect. But at the same time, you're watching these groups, you're going on their websites, and they're sounding like Brother Billy's Bible Bastion. They're sounding and talking and thinking like evangelical Protestants. And they're getting pissier. I remember, because I was, as I've intimated, I was very deeply involved, not just socially, but personally too. Very, at a certain point in my life, those 15 years, very deeply involved in the traditional Catholic thing. And in retrospect, I was probably more well read on certain aspects of it than a lot of those people. But that's another discussion. But I remember in 27 when Suorum Pontificum come out, literally up until then, all the traditional Catholics were talking about was, why can't we worship like our fathers worshiped? Why can't we just live out the tradition of the church? Literally within the same week as Suorum Pontificum came out, across the board, I began hearing, no, now it's time to get rid of the Novus Ordo. And of course, this is the same vindictiveness for 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 years. Every community that has been on the outside and has come into power, the first thing they do is turn the guns on their former oppressors. And now they become the oppressors. There's a million examples, from the Christians of St. Augustine's time to the African National Congress of our day, and 1,000 times in between. Look at the behavior of homosexual movement. I mean, they are just as tyrannical as when they were on the outs, vice versa, 50 years ago, and so forth and so forth. This is a human aspect, this vindictiveness. This is not a traditional Catholic aspect, but you would hope for better from them, and they did not assert it, right? So from 2007 until now, the traditional Catholics, it wasn't just, oh, can't we just pray like our fathers? It was, no, we need to get rid of the Novus Ordo. We need to have another council or some legislation to do so. Total nonsense, total fantasy. Very similar type of fantasy that you saw in like the QAnon stuff, actually. So that pissiness continued. Go on. I just mentioned some of these YouTubers. Go on their sites. They sound like Lutherans in the 1630s. I mean, really, listen to some of these people. They sound like Calvinists. So anyway, the sectarianism of the traditional Catholics during their period of grace, which was significantly longer than the MAGA period, that continued. The sectarianism. And they'll say, look, in our Latin Mass, we pray for the Pope. But as one astute gentleman pointed out, they don't pray with the Pope. These sectarians don't pray with the Pope. Oh, look, our ordinary, the local bishop. We say the name of the local bishop in the Holy Mass. But you don't pray with him, because the bishop invites all the clergy on Holy Thursday to pray with him in the cathedral. And the sectarians will not do it, because they've come to a certain liturgical theology, which is sectarian, right? I mean, if you will not pray with someone else, obviously you're not on the same page. It doesn't matter if you say their name in the canon. And again, those years of grace under Suorum Pontificum were met with disrespectful speech. And again, a lot of these terms that I'm about to use and have used, some of these insights are simply, as I said with the MAGA stuff, are things that I've gleaned from others. So these are not original. I'm putting this original presentation together, and I hope it's benefiting yourself as it is myself. But finally, there is this presumption of suspicion, and that never, ever went away. In fact, it intensified. It intensified. And part of that has to do with the addiction that the Latin Mass people, at least in America, have with the American conspiracy movement, which is, and the truth movement, which is a hodgepodge of factions and ideologies and spiritualities. And it should not actually be that surprising that so-called traditional Catholics in the 2020s are sounding like Calvinists, because that's a huge topic. A lot of the truth movement is in its own way a peculiar mutation off of the Reformation and the anti-authoritarian and suspicious attitudes which developed in the 16th and 17th centuries, which have always been dormant against and concerning authority in America. So it actually should not at all be peculiar that you have this disrespectful anti-authoritarian aspect, anti-authority aspect in the so-called traditional Catholics, given the dynamics of the let's say the watering holes that they're drinking from. It's a shame they don't read the Church Fathers. right? It's a shame they don't spend their time reading the councils. It's a shame they just constantly just regurgitate. And this actually brushes up on a much deeper aspect of American Catholic sociology, which is the inherent insecurity of American Catholics, and that has to do with aspects of WASP society from the 18th and 19th century. But it's very fascinating that Catholics have never gotten over that insecurity, and their only response to it, which is one of the responses of domination, is to be like your oppressor. So that's why Catholics will they'll out worldly the worldly people, they'll out Protestant the Protestants, because they're fundamentally insecure. And one of the proofs of that is, right, they just completely swallow the type of pissy anti-authority tone of voice which exists in the truth movement, which itself is a type of a spin-off of the Protestant ethos in America. Okay, so we'll bring it to a close here. Hopefully we have some things to think about. Let's bring it all together. Let's recapitulate things, recap. We began this with an advertisement, which I'm grand for. And that advertisement was about the divine office. And that isn't just about me getting one last plug-in, but also my wanting to talk about time redeemed. You want to fight the New World Order? Come to the Divine Liturgy. Come online. You don't even have to travel. You want to fight the New World Order? Study the Holy Bible. You want to fight the New World Order? Stop being intoxicated all the time. You want to fight the New World Order? Stop having a bank account. So then we moved into a song by Karen Casey, The Ballad of Accounting. And we're going to have momentarily Ewan McCall joining us with Peggy Seeger as they sing the original of that. How are we using our time? After that, when I returned, we're recapping everything. I laid out the two communities we were looking at. I had a disclaimer that I don't belong to either, or at least keep the civil one at arm's length. And at some point, I will completely sever my relationship with that. So in a sense, I don't really have a dog in the race. And yet I'm profoundly sympathetic to both the MAGA movement and the traditional Catholics. If only they were as sympathetic to their ideologies as I am. Let's put it that way. And then disclaimer seen to, including one of the disclaimers was that if you don't care about either of those groups or don't affiliate with them, that's fine, because they're just examples. You ought to be able to adduce the same principles in whatever social relations you have and social groups you participate in. Then we laid out the historical circumstances of the MAGA movement and Suram Pontificum, how these were moments of grace. And then we laid out how the partisans of both communities spent their hour in the sun, completely pissing around and wasting their time, wasting the providential grace they were given. The final conclusion to all of this is to use the opportunities we have well, to use the time we have well, to use it powerfully, to not dick around. And all full circle to the Jesimas, to Septuagesima, and leading into Lent. What are the readings we have? Adam, Noah, Abraham, Lent, Moses. And then in the present books, Hebrews, which is the mystification of the liturgy and things. But the point is, though, in Bible history, there's a certain cyclical aspect, and that when you are in slavery, you will eventually be given the opportunity to get out of it. When you are in captivity, you will be eventually given the chance to get back. When you are under domination, you will eventually have the wheel turn around again. So the next time for the MAGA people and the traditional Catholics, the next time Providence taps you on the shoulder, don't mess around anymore. You messed up the first time in these most recent examples. God knows how many times similar communities have wasted their grace. The next time it happens, don't let the failure occur once more. Thank you so much for your attention. I would welcome your correspondence on this matter. It's best actually not to put it in the discussion below. Often I don't receive the notifications. If you would like to speak, as I would, with you, please write myself at ApocatastasisInstitute at AOL.com. I would be interested in your thoughts on these matters. With that being said, please consider enrolling in Apocatastasis. We have full-time enrollment as well as a bevy of individual courses. With all that seen to, please enjoy Ewan McCall and Peggy Seeger.
In the morning we built the city.
In the afternoon walked through its streets.
Evening saw us leaving. We wandered through our days as if they would never end. All of us imagined we had endless time to spend. We hardly saw the crossroads and small attention gave to landmarks on the journey from the cradle to the grave, cradle to the grave, cradle to the grave.
Did you learn to dream in the morning?
Abandon dreams in the afternoon.
Wait without hope in the evening.
Did you stand there in the traces and let 'em feed you lies? Did you trail along behind 'em wearing blinkers on your eyes? Did you kiss the foot that kicked you? Did you thank 'em for their scorn? Did you ask for their forgiveness for the act of being born, act of being born, act of being born? Did you alter the face of the city?
Make any change in the world you found?
Or did you observe all the warnings? Did you read the trespass notices? Did you keep off the grass? Did you shuffle off the pavement just to let your betters pass? Did you learn to keep your mouth shut? Were you seen and never heard? Did you learn to be obedient and jump to at a word, jump to at a word, jump to at a word?
Did you ever demand any answer?
The who and the what and the reason why?
Did you ever question the setup?
Did you stand aside and let 'em choose while you took second best? Did you let 'em skim the cream off and then give to you the rest? Did you settle for the shoddy, and did you think it right to let 'em rob you right and left and never make a fight? Never make a fight, never make a fight. What did you learn in the morning?
How much did you know in the afternoon?
Were you content in the evening? Did they teach you how to question when you were at the school? Did the factory help you grow? Were you the maker or the tool? Did the place where you were living enrich your life? And then did you reach some understanding of all your fellow men, all your fellow men, all your fellow men?
Hi, everyone. I hope you enjoyed that presentation brought to you by ApocatastasisInstitute. If you would like to assist our work, you may do so by going to apocatastastisinstitute.wordpress.com/contact, and you can access our donations website, rhetoricanova.xyz. You can find that down below in the description. See you next time.